This is King Noble Black Supremacy. With this particular video, I want to talk about how America is not against racism. It's not against racism. America is strong against a lot of things. And I don't have to go down the list. Racism is not one of it. It's not one of them. America likes to appear that it's against racism. And it speaks out and tries to condemn overt racism, racial attitudes, racial perspective, and racial propaganda. But it's not against racism. America's approach to racism is a slap on the wrist. America says that it's against terrorism. And it is against terrorism after it happens. But it's not against what causes terrorism when it comes to race. Specifically, white supremacy, domestic terrorism. Is not against it. America is not against racism, and by default, the way it's set up and structured, it fundamentally supports racism. It allows for racism to go viral. It allows for racism to be popularized. It allows for racism to continue to perpetuate itself. It takes a neutral enough position to allow racism to continue to thrive and grow in this country. Right now, America is against illegal immigration to the point that they're building up a wall. They're going and grabbing illegal immigrants and taking them out of this country. They're even changing the laws for people to gain legal immigration in this country and making it more harder, more stricter, and vetting people even more. They are changing legislation on a local level, state level, and at a federal level because they are against illegal immigration and they want to really truly control how immigrants enter this country. And they're more against illegal immigration than they are against racism. I'll use something like illegal immigration because everything else you all will say, oh, they definitely should be against that. They definitely should be against that. And you'll be distracted by how much they should be against certain things than really grasping what my point is. So I'll use illegal immigration or immigration as a whole. But you can see that's something that Trump's administration is against, something that America is against. Racism is not one. Understand this. America has never been against racism. It was built on racism, slavery, human degradation, dehumanization, white superiority, white supremacy concept. It's never been against racism and never will be so far. But they give you the lip service. Oh yeah, we're against racism. Oh, that's so awful. That's so terrible. We're against white supremacy. That's so terrible. That's not true. Because how you know that America is against something is when they make legislations against it. when it becomes illegal. That's when America is against it. They have made no legislations as a government against racism. Now, we talk about civil rights. We talk about affirmative action, which Donald Trump is messing with that. Now he's going against affirmative action because he supports a lot of the alt-right philosophy and ideology, and he believes white discrimination exists, and there's no specific need to give any special interests or special privileges to minorities who are victims of white supremacy in this country to make sure they get a fair share or equal opportunity. Hell, that's just white discrimination. You're just discriminating against white guys. That's that alt-right, white conservative, white nationalist mentality that Trump is spewing out, and that he's making it one of his missions in being in office to attack affirmative actions. What America has done and what it continues to do is it tries to fight institutionalized racism, on the job discrimination, affirmative action, institutionalized racism as far as corporations and government-based institutions, the military, schools, racism on the job. But it fights those and kind of like suing people, filing lawsuits, class action suits, not the criminalization. So they have a civil attitude to racism, not a criminal attitude against racism. Let's be clear on this. But when America is really against something, it makes it criminal. Until America says, the United States government, calling a person a nigger, speaking in a hateful manner to incite hatred against a certain people, to promote division verbally or with any propaganda among people of the United States based on skin color, is illegal and criminal, and you can be prosecuted for it and go to jail and be locked up. America is not against racism. And they hide their continuous support of racism and allowance of racism under the freedom of speech. That you have the freedom of speech. We can't mess with that. But if I go out and I put a rally together and say we should rob banks, we should start robbing banks and robbing people and robbing these corporations, and I start speaking out on that, they're going to have me arrested. Because I'm now trying to get people to be involved in criminal activity. I'm promoting criminal activity. That will be considered conspiracy to commit a crime. Am I lying? If I go out and say that, we should start robbing banks and get people together and say, and have them chant out, rob banks, rob banks, rob banks. They're going to have me arrested for conspiracy. Promoting criminal activity. I'm sure there's many laws on the books where I will not be free to say that. I would not be free to say that. If I come out and have a rally and say that we need to rob banks and commit criminal activities, I'll be arrested. Because they are against it. But if I come out and say nigger and hate niggers and hang niggers and lynch niggers and they nothing but monkeys and this, that, and the other, they gonna say, oh, well, that's their free speech. We're against that. We condemn those words. They shouldn't say that. Oh, that's so bad. That's so awful. That's not what America's about. But it's not criminalized because they're not really against it and they understand it. America is not against something until it becomes criminal. Bottom line. And Dr. Martin Luther King had a dream where we would go beyond race and discrimination. He had this dream. But until that dream becomes legislation, we'll still live in the same social setting, the social situation and predicament that we lived in when Dr. Martin Luther King was alive. There are no legislations against racism. Now, sure, they say if you commit a hate crime, you're going to do more time. That's a federal crime. That's a federal offense. But coming up with the type of ideology that would promote people to commit hate crimes, putting together the rally, the marches, the motivation, and inspiring people to want to commit hate crimes and want to discriminate based upon color, to want to be hatred towards other races and to be exclusive to the point of violence, to the point of dehumanization, to inspire people to do that, to speak on that publicly, to broadcast that. It's completely legal in this country. As though that broadcasting that, speaking on that will not lead to the act of hate crimes and domestic terrorism. So if you support and you have no legislation against people speaking on it, against people espousing this rhetoric, then by default, you support people who will go out and be motivated by the rhetoric to go out and commit the actions. America is not against racism. When America is against something, it becomes legislation. It becomes criminalized. And until racism becomes criminalized, it's not even taken serious. That's why we need counter protesters to go out and protest against racism. Because the government is not going to do anything about it. The government doesn't care. The United States government does not care about racism and racist ideology and bigotry in this country. It just does not care. It turns a blind eye to it. That's why the police were inactive that day. That's why the police did not intervene, because they do not care. Racism is legal in the United States of America. It's legal, completely fucking legal. They hide behind the freedom of speech to act like they're neutral. They're not neutral. They're secretly and silently insupportive. And as long as you allow the pathways and the opportunities and the platform and the medium for people to espouse their racism and rhetoric and hatred towards other people, as long as you leave that door open, they're going to continue to keep running through it. And while you've built a wall around immigration, illegal immigration, you refuse to build a wall around racism in this country. You got immigration task force in this country. Do you have racism task force in this country? Why don't they have a racism if they so fucking against racism? Why don't they have an anti-white supremacy, anti-racism task force and military? Why don't they have a anti-white supremacy and racism task force as a part of the Department of Homeland Security? I'll tell you why, because they don't give a fuck about racism in this country. And by default, they support it. It's a part of this country. The blood of racism is running through the veins of this country, and it's just something that you have to accept. That's what it's about. And only weapon against racism is the courage, the bravery in the heart of the victims, of the oppressed, that when they stand up to the racist government, to this racist country, and to the average races in this country, like David stood up to Goliath, will continue to exist in the same racist situation, because they're not going to change. This government is not going to change. And they're not really against racism. Not at all. They understand it. They identify with it. They relate to it. They concur. That's why white terrorism is not even looked at as terrorism. It's like, we understand. It's like, did you have to go that far though? We understand. Like, wow. You was just a little confused. You just didn't know how to express yourself. You should have just put it in a rally that could have just motivated somebody else to do it. It didn't have to be you. They don't even see white terrorism. They see it as it is. It's just, wow, that's kind of bad, but we understand. That's why we won't even deal with it like it's real terrorism. It's King Noble Black Supremacy. Join my website, www.kingnobleuncensored.com. Donate, don't hate. Subscribe to my new YouTube page now, King Noble Guru. Hit the like button. Hit the bell. Turn your notifications on so you can get notified every time I put out a new video, so you can stay aware and up on what's going on with the Black Supremacy movement and be the first to get the information as soon as it comes out. Black Supremacy.